Riots are continuing across cities and towns right across the UK. Almost 400 people have been arrested so far after a week of unrest. For more on this, Dr. Jessica White, the Acting Director for Terrorism and Conflict at the Royal United Services Institute, joins us now from Washington. Have we got you in Washington? Dr. White, thank you for coming to us. We've been looking at these live pictures out of the UK, and there seems to be no sign of the violence on the streets letting up. What are you making of it at the moment, what you're seeing? And we're just looking at pictures now out of Plymouth where there appears to be two kind of rival protests going on, and certainly the police getting caught up in the middle of it all.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think it's unfortunate to say, but probably true, that we'll continue to see some unrest for a period of time because it has gained so much momentum. It would be difficult, I would say, to halt it immediately. But I do think it's worth noting that I would suggest that it won't go on forever, that there will be an end to it, sort of as it loses steam eventually. These things tend to last, only as long as sort of the online motivators can maintain that momentum with their followings.
What's going on? Is it the far-right thuggery, as Sir Keir Starmer has said, the Prime Minister? What do you make of it?
Yeah, it's tricky the way it's labeled, I think, partly because we don't know, who all the actors are behind the motivation to violence, the sort of the social media, the online motivation to violence. I think it shows, a slight discrepancy perhaps in how violence is addressed in the UK, sort of where if this violence was coming from a different ideological perspective, perhaps the immediate response would not have been thuggery, but would have been more of a counterterrorism response. So I think there's an interesting question in there about how we think about this type of violence, who's motivating it, who's participating in it, what it's based on, the sort of Islamophobia, the racism, the misogyny, the sort of elements of it, and what motivates that, I think leaves a larger question of how we treat this, and is it treated equally as other threats that would present themselves in the West.
Yeah, so the other thing that's happened over the last few hours is Elon Musk apparently putting out on his social media platform suggesting that civil war is inevitable, and that got some a stern response from the UK government as well. Is there a need to, we keep talking about more restrictions and regulations around social media, but what can be done here? How do we approach this kind of violence that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think, it's important to note that social media is a medium, right? It's a tool that's being used as a very effective tool because it easily reaches, a large number of people, but it is just a tool. So there are actors behind that tool that could be, the ones sort of apprehended, prosecuted, dealt with in relation to the motivation that they're providing. I think we need social media to be active. We need the online tech companies to be active in ensuring that this content is moderated, is dealt with, is fact-checked, all of these elements of the mis and disinformation that's being spread by these actors. But ultimately, there's an element of social grievance, of wider social grievance, of wider, sort of racism and sexism that exists across society, and how that is being stoked, I guess, by bad actors who are wanting to encourage this sort of wider population of people to get involved in violence, those that wouldn't necessarily hold a violent extremist ideology themselves, but who are willing to go out and protest, where these protests are turning violent. Obviously, it becomes very dangerous. So I would suggest that it's not, not an element of civil war necessarily, but an element of really looking inward. And I think if you look in these towns, post the sort of protests of the violence that's been happening, you can see that the communities that are coming out to help clean up, the communities that are coming out to help those people that have been victim to that violence. So I think the communities themselves don't want to see this be turned into a larger platform than it is.
All right. Dr. Jessica White, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.